I am standing in front of one of the only Christian bookstores in the entire state of Utah. And yes, as of the recording of this video, I went on Google just a few minutes ago and looked. This is the only Christian bookstore in the entire Salt Lake area. There are a number of LDS bookstores, but no Evangelical Christian ones. I am standing in front of the Utah Christian Research Center, located in Draper, right off 123rd and I-15. Back in the 1960s, before there was internet, before there was ready access to the whole host of information about Mormon history and the teachings of past Mormon prophets that we have today, well, there was the Tanners. Gerald and Sandra Tanner opened up the Utah Lighthouse Ministry Bookstore in the 1960s. And if you're at all involved in Christian efforts to reach Latter-day Saints, then you will have probably heard of the Tanners. They did a whole host of research into early Mormonism, looking at Joseph Smith and the teachings of the early prophets, and explained why, from a Christian worldview, not only does the LDS Church not hold up, but that Christianity is a coherent worldview and worth investigating. They were landmarks in the area of Christian efforts to reach Mormons. But earlier this year, in 2023, Sandra Tanner retired, and with her retirement came the closing of the Utah Lighthouse Ministry Bookstore, the closing of the last Christian bookstore in the state of Utah.
After I moved to Utah in 2004, I ended up volunteering at the Utah Lighthouse Ministry Bookstore that was run by Sandra Tanner. And of course, ministry to the Latter-day Saints the story isn't even complete unless you mention Gerald and Sandra Tanner and all the many years that they ministered here in this state among the LDS people. Well, we had a lot of people come into the bookstore that were either struggling Latter-day Saints and were just looking for answers to the many questions they had, as well as a lot of Christians who wanted information on how they could share their Christian faith with their LDS friends and loved ones. So we had an incredibly fruitful ministry just talking to people. It wasn't so much selling books as it was really having the opportunity to share, minister, and answer questions. Well, with the bookstore being gone, people were asking us if we could continue something like that. And the bookstore itself, where it was located across from the ballpark downtown, really wasn't conducive for what we were thinking of doing. You see, we wanted to do something a little bit more than just have books on the subject of Mormonism. We certainly wanted to do that, but we wanted to expand the topics that we would cover. So we have a lot of materials that deal with not just the subject of Mormonism, but other religious groups as well. Plus, we also have materials that deal with a lot of the challenges that face Christians today when it comes to things like critical race theory, atheism, where did our Bible come from, is it transmitted accurately, and things like that. We also wanted to have a classroom where we could train missions teams that are coming up to Utah. We have a facility now where we can do just that. We wanted to also have museum-type archaeological artifacts, many of them thousands and thousands of years old. One of the things that we're trying to say here at the center is that the Bible is a book of real people, real places, and real events. That's something that, for Latter-day Saints, they never had that luxury when it came to the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon does not have a real history behind it. It does not have archaeology behind it. The Bible's not like that, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do. Should we have a Latter-day Saint come into the center who is struggling with their belief in the Bible, we want them to know that there is evidence that will help them draw the conclusion, as we have, that the Bible is a book of real people, real places, and real events. I think history and archaeology can tell us that the Bible is worth trusting when it comes to those areas. Should we have Latter-day Saints that are still struggling with whether or not they should believe the Bible, we have displays that answer that challenge, talking about the transmission of the text. I don't know if a lot of Christians really appreciate the sacrifice that a lot of those who came before us had to give in order to give us the Word of God in the English language. Of course, you can't talk about that subject at all without mentioning men like William Tyndale and Wycliffe and people like that. And what we've done is we have a number of old copies of our English Bible. For instance, a 1630 edition of the King James Version. We also have a 1615 Geneva Bible. That's one of my favorites here because the Geneva Bible was the Bible of choice for the pilgrims. Well, the 1615 edition that we have, imagine, was printed 5 years before the pilgrims even arrived here at Plymouth Rock. It's sometimes fun for people just to see these things. For me personally, it makes me appreciate, like I said before, the sacrifice that men like Tyndale and Wycliffe and others gave of their lives to give us the Bible in English, and it's something that I personally really appreciate. We also wanted to have a research library should Latter-day Saints want to see the hard copies of the various books that they've maybe heard about or read about. We have a lot of LDS resources, many of their own periodicals, many of the sets of books that they've put out over the years. We have a complete set of the Ensign magazine. We have a complete set so far of the Liahona magazine. We even have improvement era periodicals going back to the 19th century, as well as the usual Journal of Discourses and the Discourses of Brigham Young and so forth.
It's kind of a rare thing in our age to have a physical location. I mean, bookstores everywhere are becoming less and less popular. When people want something, they just go to the internet. But there is no alternative for walking into a place and getting to talk one-on-one with people who care about you and want to understand your struggles and care about your eternal soul.
One of the things that we wanted to do was to be a place where people felt safe. A Latter-day Saint naturally doesn't want to take a lot of their doubts to their bishop. They want to talk to someone who they feel is somewhat neutral and that they can trust. And we hope that we can be that type of a person to them.
And so for those who are questioning the LDS Church, who aren't really sure about what they believe, and who are interested in learning more about Christianity, about why we believe what we believe, about the reliability of the Bible, the historical accuracy of the biblical account, and about why we disagree with the LDS Church's teachings and doctrines, well, this is a super helpful resource to be able to have. Instead of just Googling things, you can actually talk with someone who is able to answer questions you might have and walk you through why Christians believe what they believe. If you are in any relative proximity to the Salt Lake Valley, please stop by this bookstore, ask for a tour. I'm sure whoever's there would love to give you a tour. Take a look at the archaeology exhibits, poke through some of the books, and be encouraged that there are Christians out there who care about their LDS neighbors and want them to know the gospel of grace, so much so that they would buy an actual physical building here in Draper, Utah, to be able to have a context where they can talk with people about the gospel.